This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski, here today to talk about the Detroit Tigers. What the hell happened the opening weekend for the baseball team that plays downtown? Today's opening day, guys. Please take it easy. Be safe. I know that it's party time today. You're having a good time with it. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. But we got to talk about it because this team just, that first impression with that weekend was so distasteful. Luckily, they got their first victory against the Astros, which for some reason the Tigers and A.J. Hinch find themselves having success against the Astros. But we'll talk about some of the changes in baseball, the pitch clock, what's our interest level with these Tigers and what it means. And then second half of the podcast, make sure you stay tuned. We're going to talk about Jalen Carter mock draft. One of the premier analysts put out their second mock draft with trades and a 2-rounder. So we got to talk about it when we get to break down 4 picks that were made. So all in all, a good time. Cause what's happening? Are you interested in baseball right now? I was thinking before we recorded, we did a whole episode last week and we talked about so many different things. We didn't even think to even mention baseball, and it was the opening weekend. And I said to myself, wow, one of the rare occasions where if Adam would have threw out 6 more ideas and I would have added 6 more ideas, I don't think even the Tigers would have hit one of them with everything going on. That's how disinterested I am with the team. But in some sense, the way in which that opening weekend went, it had the train wreck effect for me. I'm like, wow, the offense is horrible. They didn't play well against Tampa. They looked disinterested. And it was fun because the train wreck effect was there going, wow, this team sucks ass. And it got my attention. But in all seriousness, this baseball team is going to lose probably 100 games this year.
Dude, it was such a rough weekend if you're a Tigers fan. And look, I'll be honest with you. I did think about putting something down for the Tigers, but there's so much other good stuff going on. There's so much other stuff that's more relevant. And I think that's probably the key word in all of this. The Detroit Tigers just aren't relevant. I'm not interested in them at all. When they released their opening day lineup last week, I was like, this is a who is this of who is this? Like, you don't recognize half of these names on their lineup card. It's rough, man. This team doesn't really generate any interest or any buzz. And then what they did this past weekend, it just basically went and backed it all up. Look, I was talking to Alyssa, and she's excited about the baseball season kicking off. She doesn't actually realize how bad this team's going to be. And she's like, hey, are we going to make it downtown for a couple of games? I was like, do you really want to? And she was like, yeah, I do. And I was like, is there something good going on at Comerica Park? And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, it's baseball season. And I was like, yeah. And it's the Detroit Tigers. And she's like, what's that mean? I was like, babe, they suck. Like, they're not interesting. This is like the most uninteresting group of baseball players I can remember. Like, there is nothing about this team that makes me want to pay and go see them, much less sit down in front of a television and watch them. It is bad, man. Like, very little interest from me as far as the Detroit Tigers go. And honestly, this is going to be painful for us when we get into the middle of the stretch of the season here. Like, when we're like in July and baseball's like the only thing we've got going on. And I'm like, keep telling myself, like, you're going to have to get interested. You're going to have to get invested. You're going to have to find things to talk about. And that's the team that you're going to have to go find things to talk about. But to be honest with you, little to no interest. I took the Thursday afternoon game in last week when they played Tampa. And then I took in the Sunday afternoon game when they were playing Tampa as well. And I was just like, this team it's a rough watch, man. It is hard. Now, look, Sunday afternoon, I was drinking heavily, my bowling league ended and I was having a good old time, but I was watching the Tigers and I was like, if it wasn't for these beers, I wouldn't be able to watch this game at all. Now they bounce back. They take a game from Houston. Opening day is here. It's always a giant festivity. It's always a massive parade. But when it comes down to it, I don't think this team has sticking power. I don't think this team has enough. They play 81 games at home. I don't know if this team has enough to get you to want to venture out to see 5 games, much less go to 2 or 3 this season. It's going to be rough if you're a Tigers fan. There's not a whole lot here. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times when you're going through this rebuilding process, right? Now we are entering the rebuild of the rebuild, which absolutely sucks. And I think that's why the level of interest is so low. You can usually count on the growth of the players. So like, what are we going to be looking for? We're going to be looking for what? Riley Green to build on whatever he did at the end of last year. Going to be looking at Spencer Torkelson not getting sent down this year. Going to be looking at Austin Meadows, hoping that he can mentally be strong enough to make it through the season and be able to play and contribute. Looking at Javi Baez not striking out close to 200 times. I mean, this is what we're looking for. Like, listen to what I just told you. We're talking about guys not getting sent down to the minors. We're talking to guys hoping that they've got their mental health in check and are able to make it through a season. You're talking about a guy not possibly striking out 200 times. Like, this isn't a good team. You know, I mean, Eric Haas is your cleanup hitter right now. You've got a guy who's made a ton of money, and that guy's batting at the bottom of your order, Miguel Cabrera, and it's his last season, and that's what they're trumpeting. That's what they're telling you. Come down to the ballpark. Come see Miggy's last run. Come see his last ride. I don't really need to see that. I've seen enough of it last year. I have little to no interest in this baseball team, Doc. It's going to be a very rough season for you and I when it comes to putting topics together and finding items to talk about when it's in regards to this baseball team. I'm very happy that we've got the Lions and that they're doing a lot of good things because this baseball team is going to be very difficult to talk about.
Yeah, and the thing is, in regards to attending at Comerica, for me personally, obviously, shortening the game down to 2.5 hours, 2:15 to 2:25, 2 hours and 25-minute commitment to watching a game is great. But now here's the issue. It's really conflicting because obviously I'm a sports fan and you like to go down there. It's fun, crack some peanuts, walk around the stadium, catching the ambiance, joking around, having some fun. But you literally could miss 2 innings if you go to the concession stand in a busy game. So from a consumer standpoint, the changes in the game with the pitch clock and hurrying things up is wonderful for the average viewer. But the problem lies in the fact that if I'm paying $75 for 4 people and you got food and parking and to go down there, 2 hours and 15 minutes is kind of fast. You're not getting your money's worth in the ballpark. So that's the tough part that is going to have to be looked at and to see how I want to see it. I'm not going to attend a lot of games where I pay. Obviously going to take advantage of some perks being a podcaster and things like that. Maybe get down there for a couple games to watch. Hopefully they still let me with all the nonsense shit talking I've been doing with Chris Ilitch and juxtaposing the mission accomplished sign and all that bullshit with the Tigers. But I look at it like, yes, shorten the game. TV viewers need to be able to get in, get out. 2 hours, 15 minutes is great. 2.5 hours. Obviously, the USPBL set a limit 3 years ago, so this is where we started to get introduced to the idea of shortening the game. It's a great idea. It's great. It's better for the viewer, better for everybody. But the problem lies now is you see this Tigers team and the way it's constructed, this offense, where are they going to get homers from? Where are they going to score and generate runs? And it started with this. I think the first bad juju with Scott Harris came in when his first kind of big move was bringing back a player that was like, wait a minute here. You're bringing back Matt Boyd, who was a home run machine, who struggled, and you gave him $10 million. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I get your numbers and spin rates and what he did and stuff like that. But I had the eye test. The dude was giving up a lot of home runs, and you're bringing in Comerica. So I'm like, that's your move? So they didn't do a lot, so it didn't make me have any expectations. I look at the way this team is constructed. Spencer Torkelson is got to develop. He's not hitting the baseball. The pitching staff, you let go and you moved on from some of your more productive relievers. You moved on from a lot of pieces, and what you brought back wasn't good enough. So I could see this team being a 110 to 115 loss team easily. This could be one of the worst collection of baseball talents that we've seen around these parts in a long time.
I'm going to say it is going to be the worst baseball team we've seen locally in forever. Look, you brought it up. The offensive talent just isn't there, right? Like, you have built your entire offensive lineup around Miguel Cabrera, who at this stage in his career is a shell of what he used to be. So that being said, your cleanup hitter, who is now batting 7th, 8th, 9th, depending on what day of the week it is, he's not there to help drive in runs. You don't have any power bats. You've got a guy in Javi Baez who I believe usually bats 3rd, and he strikes out at an astronomical clip. Are you looking to get home runs from Haas? I mean, if you are, I think that's a kind of a bad look. I look up and down this lineup, and unless Spencer Torkelson figures it all out, right? Unless he has some type of miraculous season, unless he puts it all together very quickly, I don't know where you're going to generate runs. I don't know where you're going to get this home run power. I don't know where you're going to be able to manufacture the runs, because you got to get guys on base in order to manufacture runs. I don't think they have enough offensive talent to do what they're being asked to do. This is going to be a really tough season. On top of that, you look at the pitching staff, and I don't think the pitching staff's any great shakes. Like, there's not one guy on this staff where I'm like, man, that guy deserves to opening day for the Detroit Tigers. There's nobody there. Like, there's nothing here. This is essentially a team where you had Scott Harris go out, make trades, and grab guys because he had to put an everyday lineup out. There is nobody on this roster where you're like, man, I got to go see that guy. You basically have taken a bunch of 4A guys, and you're like, let's just throw them together. We're going to get through this season, and then we're going to have a hard reevaluation next year. We'll have a little bit more money to play with because Miggy's contract's going to come off the books. We'll be able to do a couple of other things in free agency. Hopefully our minor league system gets figured out. We should be able to take care of a couple of other things next year. This season, for me, it's just get to the end. Whatever you got to do, get to the finish line. Figure out some way to get to 162 games, and we'll just figure it out next year. The one saving grace, you talked about it a little bit, the addition of that pitch clock. It gets to speed these games up, so we're not sitting there dying on the vine as the Tigers are down 10 to 3 because they were somehow able to manufacture 3 runs in a game. You know, they're not sitting there getting shut out, and it's taking 3.5 hours. Games are now moving at a much faster pace, which I think is much more enjoyable. And I think if you are a casual baseball fan, it's going to help you with your viewing process. I'm high on the pitch clock. I'm very low on this roster, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's obvious Scott Harris has taken this as a evaluation year, a strip down year, but you still got to put together a competitive lineup. You got to do some things.
Well, look, when you look at the roster, do you think it's competitive? Do you think that they can go out and like, let's be honest here. I'm not expecting them to win the Central. I don't know anybody who really is expecting them to win the Central, but this team was predicted to finish, I believe, 4th in their division, finish ahead of a team like Kansas City. Do you think this team is better than Kansas City? Because right now I don't think so. I don't think this team is better than Chicago. Definitely not better than Cleveland or Minnesota. And if you go around the league, I don't think they're better than really anybody. This is a team that, again, has a legit shot of taking the first overall pick in the draft, which is nuts to me, man. It's crazy that we're still here.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's just frustrating because Alavila did such a shit job.
Yeah.
He did such a bad job.
When you're rebuilding the rebuild, it's really bad. It's a really bad look. It's a bad situation all the way around. It's not competitive, but that's the whole point, is that Scott Harris didn't do anything to make it so that anybody would believe. I mean, going into it, we all thought that it was going to be god-awful, but now seeing it, it's even worse because it's, for most people, it's year 7, 8 of a long rebuild. So we got a lot of wounds and scars. Scott Harris is just walking in going, okay, we got to tear this shit down. But he's got to deal with the fact that the Tigers fan base is pissed off because, you know, we're all mad still from Alavila and the nonsense with Brad Ausmus. So it's an unfortunate situation. that this team better hopefully continue to have success against the Astros and get close to 500, because if you go into opening day with a 1-5 record, it's just going to be really embarrassing. And that's at least good that they got a bunch of home runs and some runs in their first game of the series against the Astros. At least, okay, you got a player that's, he got a couple hits and a home run. Okay, good for you, Matt, doing some things. But it sucks too, because it has the feel of a team like where if Eduardo Rodriguez has a performance where he gives up 2 runs, then the offense is going to go cold. Or when they do have a nice offensive performance, the pitching staff is going to be horrendous. So that's the way it is. It's a bad mix of talent, and I'm curious how long AJ Hinch is going to stick with this, because this is an established manager that basically got the wool pulled out from under him, and now they're going to rebuild it. Does he have the patience to sit through 2 more years of this while they try to acquire talent? Nothing is serious in the minors.
Do you think he wants to? I mean,
I don't know.
It's one of those things where I don't even feel like AJ Hinch is on the hot seat. I feel like, if anything, Scott Harris should be on the hot seat here, because you might lose a really good manager. And it's I know it might be difficult for some people to hear that, but AJ Hinch is a hell of a manager. He's a hell of a baseball mind. And this guy was essentially promised certain things when he took over under Al Avila. And I'm assuming he had some input in Scott Harris coming in. I don't know if that was his first guy. I don't know if that was his second guy. I don't even know if that was on his list. But I would assume if you're looking at getting AJ Hinch to stay, and you're looking at trying to build something long term, AJ Hinch has to have some kind of input, right? Like, you would think AJ Hinch would be able to say, we need to go get this guy. He's a really good mind. And Chris Ilitch figures out some way to make it happen. I feel like AJ Hinch has to be a part of the decision-making process. Maybe not going out and actually acquiring the players, but he's got to be talking to Scott Harris, being like, look, this is what I need. And I feel like when Chris Ilitch was looking for a new general manager, AJ Hinch had to be a part of that conversation. Is that crazy? Am I kind of out of my mind here? Like, don't you think when you're trying to bring in a new mind, a new voice for that front office, the guy who's been here, who kind of who has his feet in it, feel like he should maybe have a bit of a say, especially if you want him to stay. Maybe they don't want him to stay, so maybe they don't. But I feel like AJ Hinch should have a little bit of a say, and I feel like Scott Harris might be on the hot seat with the manager. I don't think he's actually on the hot seat, but I think the manager might be like, look, man, you got to do something for me here, because what we got going on just isn't going to work.
Yeah, no, I think he will. He'll have an opportunity where it'll be a situation which will have input. But again, how bad is the performance? I do think once he did have a say in bringing in Scott Harris, analytical. I think that he's in it for the long term, but it's going to be a grind. It's going to be probably 2 more years before it's even remotely close to potentially being a playoff team. So it's not a bad situation in regards to getting the Dwayne Casey plan, where you get a shitty, awful team for a couple years and then hopefully you get to stay. But it's a grind living it. I mean, it's easy to say it, but to live it, dude, 162 games is long. We could check in and out every 40 games. But 162 games, getting your ass kicked and not playing competitively and having a team that doesn't score runs, I mean, that's a tough combination, at least this year. But I do expect that Scott Harris will in a year or two stock up the minor. I mean, literally, because it does have the feel of starting literally all over, from the minors to the operation to the install of analytics at a high level. So tough times ahead. I mean, we're talking years before anything tangible can come of it. And it's just disappointing, because I don't think Detroit's patient enough for that. You look at what they did with the ballpark, it's interesting, but at the same time, does it take away an advantage that you inherently had with the park? I mean, it was something to complain about, but in my mind, keep it deep. That way it gives your pitching staff an opportunity. You can go out there and take chances on some pitchers, because the ballpark would be a little bit more forgiving. So it's interesting to see. I'm curious to see how and the schedule makers didn't do the Tigers any favors. They're playing Boston and Houston and Tampa, and they're like, Jesus. And let's just hope, fingers crossed, that the Tigers can produce some relevant content at least into May. If they cannot be 15 games under 500 by the end of April and the middle of May, then we can at least keep some interest. But this year's about development, because Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, Matt Manning, some of the pitchers, but that's about it. Other than that, following along the rehab of Casey Mize, bro, Spencer Turnbull, that's the worst, is when you get hurt and you come back and you get your ass handed to you. I hate that, especially from what I saw. I was there when Turnbull almost had a no-hitter, man. It was great. It was, and I've seen him have really great performances, and he did have quality starts. To have him go down like that was a struggle, and now his first appearance back, it just scares you when you look at Casey Mize. You're like, oh man, please don't be this awful. So we'll see. But how many wins? 69 is the over-under. I think it's going to be a stretch to get to 65. I think it's going to be 62 and 100.
Yeah, I'm going with the under on the over-under for sure. I'll say 64 wins. I think they end up putting like a mini 5-game stretch together where it helps them get them over that 62 win mark, and they end up with 64 on the season. But It's going to be tough, man. It's going to be a chore. This year is going to be tough if you are a Tigers fan.
Yeah. We gave them 20 minutes. That's about enough. I'm very curious, before we talk about the Lions, tell me about your bowling league. You got some ladies, co-ed. You got the typical hardcore guy that weighs 350 pounds. That's the pro bowler there that knows his business and throws them down. You got a nice eclectic mix. You guys good? You guys winning your leagues? Or are you guys just a collection of dudes there to throw them down and see what happens? You guys fighting? Anything like that?
We are we were the worst team in the league. It was a 20-man team, and we were team 20. I was the second worst bowler in the league, and it was a good time. It's basically this weird mix of dudes who, a lot of them are from Hamtramck. It's like just a bunch of old school cats. Like, we were the youngest guys there. So it's a lot of older dudes who've just been throwing balls and throwing rocks forever and a day. It was a good time, though, man. I mean, it made Sunday mornings rough because it's just like you don't ever get a day to really sleep in. And, like, usually Sunday's my day to sleep in. So just made it a bit of a grind because you'd have to get up at 8 in the morning and be to the bowling alley by, like, 9. But it was a good time, man. I had a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to next season. Next season should be better. I should be better. Little insight on me. I went from being a straight bowler to throwing a hook, and it took me a little bit to figure out the hook, and spent a lot of money on bowling balls and a lot of time practicing, but it's what it is. I'll be better next year. We should be better next year, hopefully, but it's a good time, man. It's something to do for a couple of hours with a couple of your buddies. It's an all men, no co-ed, all men's league. The league generates a shit ton of money.
Of course, yeah.
It's crazy. Like, we ended up finishing dead last, and we had a pretty nice payout, even finishing dead last.
See?
So, I don't know, man. It's cool. Like, if you like to gamble, there's a ton of gambling that goes on in bowling. If you ever walk into a bowling alley and there's a league going on, just look at all the guys sitting around the tables. There's always money just being exchanging hands. It's a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best part about it, is the strike balls, the opportunity, the side games, all the action that's there. I'm surprised that you didn't throw a good hook at first, because from my visual here, I'm doing it here. Isn't it the reverse shocker? You hold it and then you do the shocker move here, and you hold it and you throw the ball down. I thought you'd be good at that. Middle finger in, one in the stang, two in the thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm surprised that you didn't master that ball placement, hand position pretty quickly.
When I was trying to figure out how to throw that ball, I had nobody come to me and break it down that way. Now that it's broken down that way, yeah, I should be much better at this.
See, expert analysis you get on Doc and Jock. The shocker is the great way to kind of hold the bowling ball, and then you just kind of force your wrist into there. It's kind of like an action that you could get used to if you know what I'm talking about. So there you go. Free bowling advice. And Adam now is going to be a 300 bowler. He's going to be like, oh, I know exactly what to do. The visual is there, and now his relationship has taken another step in the positive direction. You're welcome, Alyssa. No problems. You can thank me for improving hand placements and all that kind of stuff. So it's all good here at Doc and Jock. All right, got to talk about the Detroit Lions. We are in a very unique spot with the Lions in that they don't have to do really anything in regards to being forced to pick a position based on free agency. They can do best player available. They can kind of stack away a player or two. When you have 8 picks and a team that's ready-made to go now, you can look to the future a little bit with some of your picks. The other thing, though, that is permeating everybody is how much risk could the Lions take? We started to talk about it last week, but more has kind of come to light as Jalen Carter's body cam dash footage came out. People saw it. We talked about it at All Lions. People are like, oh boy, okay, he didn't exactly handle himself too properly. A little bit of shock and kind of that dismissive kind of attitude that he had if you get a chance to watch it. Jalen Carter is the big debate that's happening if he's there. I'm kind of hoping he's not. I'm hoping that Seattle takes him with number 5, hoping that Will Anderson is gone early too, so there's no talk of trading up. But Jalen Carter, if he's there at number 6, is going to be a very fascinating figure that will have to be followed by Lions fans if he goes somewhere else, should the Lions pass. I think the Lions will eventually pass. The red flags you don't need, especially when there's a plethora of other interior defensive linemen you could take even later in the draft. I think that I think that a sign was shown when you look at how he handled adversity. He fell apart. He messed up his pro day. He's got a couple of red flags. And at this level, when you're investing that kind of money into a player, I just think that he should be taken off of his board. And I don't think it'll be a big deal if they do. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, we've been championing the Lions taking guys that can play at a high level. And if Brad Holmes decides that that's the guy and he's the fit, fully supported. But I just think that you can kind of avoid the risk at this point because, bro, the NFL world is chock full of temptation. When you're a ripe young man with cash and fast cars in the Motor City, I could just see disasters. I mean, there's a mile road dedicated to the ballet that you can get in trouble with pretty quickly. You know, you could do the whole situation in which you're John Morant and your business is out there. You can go twisted real fast. And I just think the Lions mix right now is pretty good. You don't need to upset the apple cart, but the dude can play. So I'm curious, now that you've seen the footage, you kind of know the picture. Are you in or out on Jalen Carter? It's the big debate.
I'm still in, and it's just because I see a stud who can clog up the middle. Now, that being said, I'm very close to being out. It really comes down to what happens in that conversation with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. You know, I feel at this moment in time, Brad Holmes has done such a good job with so many different things and so many different aspects of building this team. And Dan Campbell has done such a good job with turning this culture over and making this team a legitimate winner and making this team a team that guys want to come and play for. And guys who are here want to take less to be here. So I'm going to trust the front office to get this one right. And I'm not trying to cop out because I'm still in on him. But I'm going to put a lot of weight into what happens when he comes for his visit. I'm going to put a lot of weight in what happens in that interview process. I'm going to put a lot of weight in what Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have as far as the discussion after he leaves and where he kind of falls on their big board. I think he is a stud, right? I feel like he is a guy who can help transform games. He's a guy who, if you paired him with Aiden Hutchinson and whoever you're rotating on the other end, you could really transform that defensive front. That defensive line will be nasty. That being said, this might be a guy who everything kind of has to be perfect. And like you said, there might be a little bit of adversity that might come along, and then you've got to make sure that you've got the hands on him to help steer him in the right direction. And generally, we don't want guys like that. We want adults in the room. And he might not be an adult in the room. You know, it's one of those things where I think we're going to have to kind of wait and see. And I think a lot will be found out in that conversation, in that discussion. That dash cam video was not great. I was left very unimpressed. And this is a guy who there's been a lot of things that have been said about him, you know, like showing up late for meetings, the way he conducts himself, the way he handles himself. Obviously the dash cam video, putting yourself in a situation like that. And then basically the biggest job interview you have, you get 2 shots at it and you kind of blew both of them. You know, you didn't really do yourself any service there. But all that being said, I still think there's enough tape out there and there's enough of what he can do where he's got to remain relevant in the conversation. And you really need to do your due diligence. You remember Laramie Tunsil? You remember the gas mask bong photo? You remember how that just tanked his draft stock? Laramie Tunsil turned out to be a pretty good offensive lineman, you know, and that was just a bad situation. Happened to happen on draft night. seems like a stepfather was involved, and it just wasn't very nice. What I'm saying is guys do make mistakes and things can get corrected, but sometimes they've got to be put in the right situation. And I'm going to trust the brain trust of the Detroit Lions, the guys who have flipped this roster over, the guys who have flipped this culture over, the guys who have been able to take dudes who play here who don't want to leave but will take monster pay cuts just to stay on the roster, and guys who are coming from winning organizations that are like, no, I want to go play there. I'm going to trust those guys to do their homework and make that right call. But again, he's still on my draft board until something else. Like, I need a little bit more to really remove him, right? Like, the dash cam video was not good. Him putting himself in that situation, not good. I can chalk a lot of those things up to being young, being dumb, making a mistake. The dash cam video, I could chalk up to not necessarily knowing that people died, trying not to get anybody else in trouble, trying not to get yourself in trouble. You obviously would prefer him to be forthright with the police while all this is going on. But again, put yourself in his shoes. Probably scared, probably unsure what's going on, doesn't want to get anybody in trouble. You never want to roll over on anybody. So, there are things there that I think all kind of play together. Then showing up for his pro day, being 9 pounds overweight, and then being gassed on his drills. I mean, this guy was facing going to jail. I'm sure that was taking a little bit more of a precedence in his life than him actually worrying about football stuff, So there's a whole lot going on, and it really feels like it has been an incredibly rough month or two for Jalen Carter. All that being said, I'm still keeping him on my board. Was less than impressed with him. He really needs to nail these interviews if he's hoping to go high in the draft. The thing I find amazing is Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, comes out and is like, we're not doing any interviews with anybody who has less than pick 10. Like, what? Like, you're trying to dictate where you're going? I don't think that's necessarily a good look. And I think that might be some bad information you're getting from a guy who's been there, done that, and does a lot of really good things for his clients. I don't know if that's the best advice. What did you make of Drew Rosenhaus being like, yeah, we're not interviewing with anybody who has less than pick 10?
Boss move. I think that's what a power agent should do. Telling everybody we think he's a top 10 pick. And I think he will be. I don't think he gets past Seattle. I think the Lions would still take a chance on him because they're about upgrading the football team. They can find ways. I mean, listen to what Brad Holmes said. He talked about frontal lobes and mistakes and things like that. In the end, I think the talent is there for Jalen Carter to justify a team taking him. And this is a Lions team that I think could embrace him with the locker room. There's leaders. They can afford a chance. I think they would probably take a chance on a quarterback before Jalen Carter with what they got going on. But if they take a risk.
Still thinking Richardson?
Yeah, exactly. I think they can afford to take it. And that's what having a good free agency period and a good team already there can do for you. But if the team feels like Jalen Carter's the guy, I think that they can do it and still have a lot of success. I think the factor is what makes me happy is I just hope and would consider him to be the next Warren Sapp. Just like, okay, he was a guy that was troubled. You take him, you surround him with good people and good coaches. I mean, because the coaching staff is full of ex-players. That's the kind of unit you want to surround him with and the kind of people you say, look, this is the mistakes you can make. This is the pitfalls. You got Antoine Randall. You got, the likes of Dan Campbell, a ton of Aaron Glenn. I mean, my God, what a mentor. Former player that can say, look, this is the pitfalls. This is what happens. The people that you're around. So there's an opportunity. And Drew Rosenhaus can potentially surround him with good people. So there's an opportunity there for him to make a name for himself and still turn it around because he's still young and very, very talented. And I think the Lions with their free agency can take a stab at a player like Jalen Carter. But we'll see eventually how this shakes out. I'm just hoping that it doesn't turn out where they pass on him and the next player at number 7 takes him and he comes out to be the next Warren Sapp or a really solid player for a long time. And you're like, oh, God, you took Tyree Wilson and everyone's like, well, there's still question marks and he ends up falling. So I do want to get your sense of this because I read an article on Tuesday morning, obviously Carlos, who has to be the naysayer with the free, but he did put out, and his role is great. Whatever you may think of him, he does throw out the ideas that you're supposed to have as a journalist, which is to question. He said that how can you really, in the premise of, I disagree with his premise, but I am very happy he threw this out there because it sparks debate. He comes out and says, how can the Lions be graded as having a top-ass bomb free agency when the highest player they got was ranked in the 20s in free agency, and they whiffed on and are not taking a stab at Lamar Jackson? And it goes to show, obviously, I disagree with the Lamar Jackson situation because of Jared Goff and how the offense has been built. But he asks a really good question. Because we're close to it and everybody's excited, I'll ask you this. When you look at it, Cam Sutton's nice. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's nice. But are the Lions getting overhyped because of the moves that they made? They could have, obviously, if you take a look at it, they could have made different moves. They could have got Jalen Ramsey. They could have took Bobby Wagner. They could have took one of the players that the Bears at linebacker took. They could have invested in different spots with the money that they had. Do you see a scenario in which maybe the Lions team building approach is getting way overhyped? Because in essence, what he's saying, which a lot of people who will be critical of a team will say, where's the high-end, all-pro, supreme talent? You got guys that fit. But in the NFL, talent wins games.
It does. This is what I would say. I think they had a great offseason because they were able to address different needs, and they were able to address those needs with high-end players. Yeah, none of those guys might be the number one guy or the number one free agent for their position group, but they were all high-end guys who were all ranked within, the top 5, top 10 of their position group. On top of that, they were able to free up and create cap space with not really losing anybody. And look, you and I think we agree. I don't think Vaitai makes this roster. I think he probably gets cut sometime during camp. So there might be some additional savings there, depending on roster bonuses and all of that. But I think what they were able to do with what they had, as far as guys on this roster taking pay cuts to stay here, going out, addressing needs and filling needs with high-end top free agents, maybe not the tippy top, maybe not the number one guy, but high-end guys, adding them to this team and still having the flexibility to go into this draft. And look at what we're talking about for the pick at 6. We're talking about an interior defensive lineman. We're talking about an edge. We're talking about a quarterback. You've been on the running back train. I don't think they're going to take running back at 6, but you've been on the running back train. I mean, at this point, this upcoming draft, they can do anything. You know, you can go quarterback, you can go defensive line, you can go linebacker, you could go cornerback if you really wanted to. You could go offensive line, you could go wide receiver. Probably won't go that at 6, but maybe at 18. You can do a ton. They've given themselves so much flexibility in this first round. You could trade up, you could trade back. This team has positioned itself in such a way where they can go out and they can add guys. And I think we all expect pick number 6 and pick number 18 to make immediate impacts day one. But they can go out and they can add guys that are depth guys and guys who will make a great impact next year, not necessarily this year. And I think that's why they get such a high grade. I get what Carlos is saying and I get where he's coming from, but all that, I still think they did a great job with their offseason. I think your secondary is dramatically improved, and I think it is incredibly strong. I think what you've done as far as adjusting and playing with cap numbers has really helped give you a girth of money where you can go and do different things. On top of that, when you're looking to move on from certain players, because if Vaitai does make this roster, he's not going to be here next year. So you were able to manufacture that cap number and have it built in to where it's not going to hurt you. Same thing with numbnuts on the defensive line. But you've done different things with this roster. You've really flipped it and turned it over. You know, you've added a running back who I think is an upgrade to what you had there before. And it wasn't like you broke the bank to go get the guy. I think you did everything very reasonably as far as dollars and cents goes. So for Carlos to come out and be so negative and to criticize it so much, I just don't necessarily understand where it's coming from, because I think that they've done a great job. I think you can look at what they did this offseason and you can see that this team did things incredibly smart, and they did things within a budget, and they did things very budget conscious. And I think they've planned for next year. Now, we're talking about winning this year, so next year we don't necessarily want to hear about until we're in a position where, like, hey, you now either need to go out and trade for a quarterback because you didn't draft one, or somehow you've got to be able to move up and trade for a player to bring somebody here who's going to make that impact. So, look, this was a team that was destitute, right? This was a team that everybody looked at as a wasteland. So you have Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell come in, and they lay a foundation. And not last year, but the year before, the way the season ended was really good. There was a lot of momentum there. We expected that to carry over into the beginning of this season, or into the beginning of last season. That didn't happen. They got on a roll late, and you could really see that foundation really took root, and they added to it. So now this year they're looking to now build on top of that foundation. You laid the foundation, you built on top of the foundation, and now you're going to start to construct your house on that foundation. That's what this year is. Next year, you're going to be looking to add that roof, or you're going to be looking to add that second floor to the mansion. It's all about adding. There's a lot of times where your team is in such dire straits, you can't do everything in one offseason, but you can do enough, and you can do a lot. And I think that's what the Lions did. They did enough, and they did a lot this offseason. And it all started with last year. So for Carlos to come out and be so negative, I just don't get it. I don't think it's fair. I think this team is in a really good spot. And I think next year, the expectation should be playoffs, and it should be winning a playoff game, and it should be a home playoff game. And again, it's taking those steps. You know, you've played on teams before. I've played on teams before. A lot of times you've got to learn how to lose. And then once you learn how to lose, you got to learn how to win. And then once you learn how to win, you got to be able to put it all together, and you got to make runs in the playoffs. And then you'll get to the championship. Sometimes it all happens within that season. But I think for the Detroit Lions, it was going to take a little bit of time. It was going to be a process. And I think you're seeing this team holding true to what they wanted to do and holding true to their process. So I think they're in a good spot.
Okay. It's an interesting debate because they invested heavily at the cornerback spot where a lot of teams can find avenues of breaking free. You know, Cam Sutton, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Yeah, you're going to have to lean on Jerry Jacobs and Jeff Okudah in the reserve roles, Will Harris. You look at it and you say, well, okay, in roster construction, it's an offensive league, and you just got to upgrade the talent that much at the defensive back position just to try to compete in this era. So we'll see. Did they get the right guys? Because there were higher ranked players that were available. It's a great sign that David Montgomery, decided to choose Detroit. The contract obviously played a role in it over the Bears and Vikings. He decides to come to Detroit. You hear a lot of players like John Kaminsky, Isaiah Buggs saying, hey, we love Detroit. That was our option. But you got to remember, too, and this is the great debate, and this is when we started a few weeks back, and hopefully you're following along each week with Doc and Jock. We said the big debate is this roster building will go a long way to determine Brad Holmes' legacy, because he is foregoing higher-end talent for fits, culture, locker room guys, the love of football. And that's great. It's idealistic. It's really a lovely strategy to try to deploy if you can do it. We bring in guys that work hard, that love football. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have a guy that leaves Detroit on a private jet but has supreme talent that doesn't love football. You know what I mean? Hey, maybe is thinking about being a movie star or a professional wrestler or whatever it is that distracts him. But at the end of the day, he can go in there and get 10 sacks and wants to leave the facility as soon as possible. I don't care about all that love of football, all that intangible nonsense. But that's what the Lions are doing. They're building a team with the belief that if we target players that love football, that are dogs, that love everything about the game, that will work hard and are mentally tough, then we can foreshadow or let go of a little bit of the talent and moving forward and affordable. Can't you have both, though?
Because if you look at would you say that Nick or Joey Bosa are some dogs, are some dudes who are incredibly talented and can do amazing things on the football field, and those are guys you would love to build your defense around? Would you not agree?
Yeah.
Both those guys?
Yeah.
Okay. You look at what Aiden Hutchinson did last year, Aiden Hutchinson outpaced both those guys for rookies. Hutchinson
well, he fell in their lap at number 2.
Much more massive numbers than those dudes did their rookie years. And he's a dude who loves football, seems to be a good character guy, a guy who is first in, first out. So I think you can have best of both.
Well,
it's just you've got to be a little bit selective.
Yeah, you do, but you got to look at it too and say, on the other token, you took Penei Sewell, a lineman. You could have had Micah Parsons, higher end talent, much more risky. You look at the Levi Onwuzurike, could have had another player that wasn't, quote unquote, a fit and took a more talented player. So I look at it and I say, you still can have arguments to say that the Lions have a strategy and Brad Holmes says football character is the highest thing that's on their list of things that they look at, meaning love of the game, football IQ, mental toughness, stuff like that. In my mind, I look at talent. Jalen Ramsey's better than all the Lions cornerbacks combined. So you realize, okay, can the Lions make it fit with Cam Sutton, who has weaknesses in terms of getting his hands on the ball and interceptions? He's always around the ball, physical, but doesn't get a lot of interceptions. CJ Gardner-Johnson, obviously position flexibility, but you can scheme around that if you're a great offensive mind. Obviously with the screens and maneuvering tight ends, you can do a lot of things from the offensive side to kind of negate defensive backs. And nowadays, if you just sniff on a receiver, you get flagged. So it'll be interesting to see. I think this is a team that can work hard to get to the playoffs, but now we're talking mano a mano, Lions versus 49ers, and they got Christian McCaffrey, and they got better players moving forward. Let's see. They got a Kinlaw. They got decent players at many different spots. I just can't wait to see it. I want to fast forward to the playoffs and see, can the Lions with Jared Goff match up with Jalen Hurts? How does that look when you got the grinder in Goff versus the natural talent in Jalen Hurts? That's what this is about. That's what's going to be shown, is can the Lions grind their way into a championship a la the Pistons. Me personally, it's cute, it's nice to grind it out. But on some level, with my starry eyes, I would love to see a Kobe team for once. I would love to see the flashy Michael Irvin show up there and be like, bam, we're it. I want to see Patrick Mahomes under center and be like, I'm the best quarterback in the world. What are you talking about? Here's my sister. She's going to do a TikTok for you guys. Instead we got guys that are like, hey, you want to go to Bible study and do some community service after? I'm like, okay, that's nice. But I'd rather go to the club and, do the thing. So we'll see. I'm hoping that the grinded out professional mentality works. But on the other side, we do always have to bring up, there is another way to build a roster that the Lions are choosing not to deploy. So Carlos, good job bringing it up. It sparks debate. It's really interesting. You know what else sparks debates? Mock drafts, baby. And a good one was released that we can talk about. Todd McShay, one of the best, one of the guys that definitely is in the know, put out his latest mock draft earlier this week, and it's 2-rounder, has a bunch of trades, but now with the Lions, they end up at 6-18, and in the second round at number 48 and number 55. Want to get your sense early in regards to the first round. He has, with Jalen Carter and Will Anderson being gone, number 6, which is a consensus among a lot of people, if Carter and Anderson are not on the board, that the Lions end up with Tyree Wilson, which is going to be the safe play. I think you'll see that name on a lot of boards because massive dude, can clog the interior, can stop the run, which would tremendously help. The issue is consistency. Still got some moves, still got some fundamentals to work through in regards to pad level and consistency in the pass rush, but he does bring a lot to the table. The controversial pick in the first round, and I'm curious to get your sense, is McShay has the Lions taking Bijan Robinson, the running back, with Kaleja Kancey still on the board. That'll be the name that people will debate because of the affiliation with Pitt and Aaron Donald, the comp. So I'm curious in the first round, do you like that selection if it's Tyree Wilson and Bijan Robinson, especially if Kaleja? I don't see the Lions going Kaleja at number 6. I think that's way a little bit higher in regards to where people see him. I think he's going to go anywhere from 10 to 16. But Kaleja Kancey is unique. High motor, can get to the quarterback, but he's also got some things on tape that he can correct too. But I don't see the Lions going Tyree Wilson, Kaleja Kancey. I would love this. First round, Tyree and Bijan. I'm sitting there kicking my feet up going, I'm happy. I give it an A.
So I'm warming up to Bijan at 18. I'm the guy who is in the camp of you don't draft a running back in the first round. But the more and more I see of him, the more and more I read on him, he is incredibly special. And guys who are that special, they just don't come around all that often. I think it would be a good first round. I think if you're somehow able to get Carter and Bijan, I think I'm happier, just because the big pressing need is the middle of that defensive line. I would love Kalijah Kancey at 18. If you can somehow get him in the second round, I'd love that even more. I've got no problem going Carter and Kancey at 6 and 18, just doubling up. I have no problems with that because I think they're two different players. I think they're two different guys who can do different things. I feel like one is big in the middle and can clog it up. And I think one guy can play inside, outside, and get pressure on the quarterback. So I don't mind it. It's not my the Tyree Wilson and Bijan Robinson is not my go-to, but I don't hate it, if that makes any sense. It's like my number 2 option if I had to pick one. I know you are huge on the running back with their second first-round pick. So I'm okay with it.
Okay. Now we go to the second round, and this is where he falls in love, that is, with the Big Ten, in picking Jack Campbell, the linebacker, which a lot of people think is a position of need. Many people also like Trenton Simpson. Cornerbacks Cam Smith and offensive tackles DeJuan Jones are in that range that were passed on. You look at Campbell, and many people project that over time, maybe not ready right away, but in his rookie season, could instantly get in the mix in the middle there at linebacker. The one that bothers me is Sam Laporta, the tight end at 55. With Trent Simpson available, I know if you take Campbell, you're not going to take another tight end, but you could go theoretically Cam Smith at number 48 and then Trenton Simpson, the linebacker, the talented linebacker at 55. So the second round, not as impressive to me to go back-to-back Iowa prospects. Jack Campbell's a beast. Obviously, many people do view him very well, highly, and I think he would fit. But a tight end, I just don't think you need in this draft. It's a position that you got 3 of them already, Brock Wright, Shane Zylstra, and James Mitchell, that you could work with, that you don't need to invest a draft pick, at least number 55. Sam Laporta, obviously very talented. A lot of people like him. There's another, I think George Mitchell is another guy that people are blowing up and blowing smoke up his ass regarding what he can do. I just don't think that you need a tight end in this draft, I think, at this time. I think that there's a situation in which you can do a lot of good things outside of it. So for me, the second round is kind of weak.
So I like the pick of Jack Campbell. It's weird because you see different mock drafts and you hear different stuff, and he's either a guy who's gonna go. I've seen him go as late as the 3rd round. So like I don't know if you could wait and I don't know, or maybe pick him up in the second half of that second round. But I don't necessarily like going tight end. And look, I'm a little bit different than you. I don't mind doubling up on positions. If they were to take Campbell and they would come back and take Simpson, I feel like you've got your 3 linebackers for the next 4 or 5, possibly 10 years with Campbell, Simpson, and Rodriguez. I think you got your guys. Like your linebacking core is now set. And you don't necessarily have to worry about anything. I think Anzalone ends up playing this season, and at some point, Simpson and Campbell end up overtaking him, and he becomes a rotational guy. So I don't have a problem with doubling up if you feel like these guys are absolute studs. I think what the Detroit Lions are probably going to do, and it's because of what they've done in free agency, they've given themselves this luxury, this opportunity. I think they're going to go best player available. Like if you have 3 quarterbacks that go and then the top 2 defensive players go, at 6, what are you doing, right? Either you're moving back because you're not really impressed with anybody, or you're taking best player available. Now, when you get to 18, I don't know how many mock drafts you've done. I've done probably 110 at this point. When you get to 18, it's kind of a weird spot because there's nobody there that you're kind of like, man, this guy would instantly make this team better. There's nobody. It's all luxury picks essentially, or you're basically drafting a guy who probably doesn't fit that number, right? So you're just taking best player available again at 18. So 6 and 18, taking best player available. You get into the second round, you start looking to try to maybe address some needs, but now you're doing it with what? You're doing it with second round talent. So again, you're going to go best player available. Yeah. I feel like with this draft, the Lions have done something. This is where I feel Carlos Menares is just a little bit off. They set themselves up to go into this draft where, yeah, they've got a ton of capital, especially early. They've got a lot. But you go through the mock drafts and you sit there and you think, like, does this player make an instant impact? Not necessarily, but I could also take the best player available, and now my running back core is 3 deep. My edge rotation looks sick. I can sit there and double up on linebacker, and now we've got 3 stud linebackers for the next 3 years at least. And once we sign these guys to extension, probably the next 10 years, we're good. So I think they've done something where they've given themselves a lot of flexibility in this. Now, I'm not a huge fan of what Todd McShay has mocked. I think it's a little bit rough. It's not my ideal mock draft, but there are some picks on here like Campbell I'm cool with. Bijan at 18, I'm getting a little bit warm to, right? I'm starting to, all right, yeah, he's kind of a stud. He looks like he might be an elite running back. Tyree Wilson at 6, I'm like, okay, this guy is long, lean, looks like he could be a guy who could really grow into that position and just wreak havoc. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the tight end at pick number 55, but again, it's a position that I don't necessarily think is a need. I think it's more of a luxury pick. I think you can address that a little bit later on in the draft if you really have to. But again, I don't mind it. I just feel like this team is in such a spot where they can add talent at many different levels because they've done such a good job in free agency. And with the offensive scheming, you basically took guys who were working at a car wash, plugged them in, and they were scoring game-winning touchdowns for you. So it's what it is, man. These are all just mental masturbation. It's just fun to do these things and to kind of sit there and look at what's going on and talk about it.
Sure.
I'm not a huge fan of Todd McShay's mock draft, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I made up a name, so apologies. I said George Mitchell, tight end. It's George's Darnell Washington, 6'7", 270 pounds. When you do them, I've done, like I said, 100 of them as well. Only 2 officially with the mock draft. I did recently plunk down the $80 for PFF, so I'm learning officially the grades and them. It's fun to do 2 forced trades. It's fun to do them. They're definitely good for articles because people like to shit on them all the time. They're like, oh, I love 8 of your picks, but the bottom 2, you took Jaden Reed. Guys, I went to state. So if Jaden Reed's on the board, I'm fucking taking him, okay? Stop fucking. And what PFF does is they grade your pick where, you know, Jaden Reed, I took him in a round too high. So it's a big fat red F next to it, so it takes my A grade draft down to a B because I took 2 players of the 10 much higher, which is fine, guys. Jesus, you know, my draft is A, F, A, and you guys are all like targeting like, oh my God, how could you take Jaden Reed in the 5th round when he's projected to be a 6th? I'm like, guys, that's serious. I am just sitting in front of a computer, pushing a button. The thing is on turbo mode, so I'm trying to write down who was taken in front to get some context for my drafts, but it's fun. Don't take it so seriously. I'm doing it just to throw shit up on a site. You know what I mean? And because you guys read it. But my God, I think people actually like wrestling. Like Mr. Kenneth Franzel, what he likes to do is he likes to just show up on our site and show up on our group chat just to shit on the product. I'm like, is there anything you like? Do you like the characters? Do you like the booking? Do you like anything? Okay, no, you're a critic. So I think people just love mock drafts, I think, just for the opportunity to shit on whoever's doing them. And then you're like, oh, I hate it. I hate mock drafts. Okay, well, the reason why all the sites do 50 of them is because you guys rate them at a very high clip. On Tuesday, I put up 2 mock drafts on the site, so it's fun to do. We talk about it regularly. Adam usually finds his way toward CBS mock drafts. I look all over the place, so we love it.
Because they put out like 6 of them a day.
Why do you exactly? They put out 6 a day. It's like CBS is the mock draft network, but I get it because it's awful. And just a little, you know, behind the scenes, I put out a story about the Jalen Carter video, one of the first sites to do it. I didn't have to work really the next 3 days. I could do a hardcore analysis, PFF grades, and all that stuff. And in the end, you know that if you write about Jalen Carter's body cam video, that's going to be viewed at 9x times anything that's, researched and anything like that. So that's what you do. And we try to mix in everything. That's why I love the site being called All Lions and doing the podcast, because we cover everything, the good, the bad, the speculation, the rumors, the highlights, the facts. We don't just stick to the facts. We do everything. So Jalen Carter's video, it did big numbers, mock drafts. You do 2, you do 1 is great. You do 2, it's even better. And there's new variations where I do a mock draft normally the traditional way, and then I write a story where I say, hey, this is my simulation. This is what I picked. And guys, I went to state, so I even threw you guys a bone and put Jake Moody there as the last pick. Come on. Have a little sympathy for the guy. Luckily, it's 3-1 good, but a lot of them are like, this fucking sucks. You took this guy to overshown at this. I'm like, oh, man, you guys are hardcore. So that's what's fun. We got a chance to break down Todd McShay's mock draft, and I'm sure Mel Kiper will fall right behind. That dude has the best gig in sports. He just throws out 6 mock drafts a year, all of them with 20% or less accuracy. He gets paid, and he does a lot of talking and research in regards to the draft night, and then he goes about his day for the rest of the year. So it's fun. It's a great opportunity to break down the draft, which we will do. We will try to bring you great mock drafts. I brought Todd McShay this week. Adam will be tasked with next week's, and we'll always have fun debating what the Lions could do. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter as our 60 minutes are up. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Lots of fun talk and debate with the Tigers and Lions this week. Thanks, everybody, for subscribing anywhere that you listen to your favorite audio broadcast. Type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you as we make noise and continue to grind it out with these Detroit teams. We appreciate your interaction, cuz that was fun. Wish you luck in your future endeavors with your bowling league and the Shocker Grip. I think that you're going to take it to the next level and get out of the basement. You can't be in the basement in bowling. Dude, these guys are old. You got to find a way, get out of the basement, and we'll follow along in your journey because, listen, fun, entertaining leagues are always fun to talk about, and there's always fun shit to talk about with bowling, as I have close friends that lived in the world of bowling as I was a youngster, and just hearing the stories were fucking wild regarding what people do at these bowling leagues. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Thanks, everybody. Let's get after it next week.